Hi, welcome back to the tutorial on how to make batch rename. This is the third episode in the series. In this episode, we are going to be making the confirm rename button actually work, which will cause all of the previewed renamed assets to be renamed, whether they're actors or whether they're assets, and we'll be also hooking up things like undo and the ability to kind of control some of the feedback that we've got. So again, in the last one, we had set up a find and replace function in Python, and we had set up a preview function which gets called during the initialize, which again gets called from whenever one of these buttons are clicked on all of the available or the selected actors or selected assets. Those get run. So in this one, we're going to go to the confirm rename button. Going to again do the on clicked here, so we have a reaction here. And then instead of adding to this list, we're just going to get all the objects in this list. We're going to get all the entries, and we're going to do a for each. We're going to take this array element and we're going to cast it to the right type, which is this list item. And then with this list item, we are going to need to run a command, which we don't have yet. So again, we're just going to compile and save here, and we're going to go add a new function back in our list item. And this function is confirm rename. I want spaces, so I'm going to get rid of those. So with the confirm rename, we have our old name, we have our new name, and that's all we need to work with. So we're going to take our old name, take our new name. We've got our actor or asset, and so we're going to follow the same scheme that we did before. We're going to take the asset actor. We're going to follow the same scheme that we did with our cache old name here, where we have the old name and the new name. And so we're going to do that. We're going to take this get, and we're going to take this branch here. So again, this is a validated get of the actor. If the actor is invalid, then we assume it's an asset. If the asset is invalid, then we are going to do nothing. But if the asset is valid, then we will process the rename on that. Right. We're going to set actor label. We're going to set that to the new name. And for the asset, we are going to do the same thing. We are going to take the asset data, which we now know is valid because we've clarified that, and we're going to do get asset. And we'll do a rename asset. So here we only load this right when we need to do the rename. Before it's done, there was no renaming. This will not do a move, so this can't be done. You can't move this from folder to folder. This will be only for that kind of leaf path, but we'll cover the bases there. And so again, once we've done that, we just add return nodes for cleanliness. There we go. So now back in the batch rename, we now have the function that we need, which is the confirm rename. And that would be good to go. So let's go ahead, do run editor widget. Let's test it out. We're going to take these. We're going to replace SM with boo preview actors. You can see boo SM, one instance of SM has been replaced. We're going to do confirm rename. Those have all been renamed. But then we say, oh, actually, that's not what I wanted to do. Let's Control Z. Control Z doesn't do anything. In fact, Control C just changes this from boo to nothing. And that's because we didn't set this up as a transaction that will let us do what we need to do of knowing when we are actually doing the rename. So to set up that transaction, we want to do a create transaction. This is a macro that's designed to kind of make it more explicit or a little bit easier to understand. You can also use begin transaction. which is another version of this. But then you have to also remember to do an in transaction. So here with the create transaction, what we're going to do is we're going to do pending. We're going to do this for each. After the for each here, we are doing a transact object on the entry. And then completed, we're going to go back into the finalize here. The context that I'm going to give it is EUW batch rename, and the description will be confirm rename, which is the name of this step. So now I've got all these. I want to rename them from boo to SM again, preview actors. That's working. Confirm, they're renamed. Control Z, they're back to boo. Something that I didn't show in the previous one, and what we're going to set up here is a bit of our documentation, is we actually have the ability to use some wildcards. And so one of the wildcards that we set up was the variable name. Name here gives us that, that's the old name here. So if we put the find pattern over name, what we're doing is we're renaming the whole thing. We're saying, I don't care what its name is. I'm not trying to find something. I'm just replacing everything with the name. And so what I'm going to replace with is actor, preview actors. They're all going to be actor. The other thing that we added was index. So we can put in index here, so score, and now they're all actored in the selection order 0 to 5. There's no reordering of this ability here, but someone could change some value here. So we just set it to like 35 or something like that if we wanted to. But another feature of this is because we're using those F strings that we talked about in the previous episode, we can set up things like padding. So the syntax for that in an F string is you have a variable like index, you do colon, and then 0, and then the number of pads that you want. So for example, 0, 3, if you do preview actor, now they're using 3 digits. We can also have it so that it starts a different number. Maybe we don't want it to start with 0, we want it to start with 15. So we go back to before the colon and we add 15 to it, preview actors. Now it's 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So that gives us the basis of how we do those renames here. So now those are all set up. So for this final step of this stage of this video, we're going to just be putting in some polish to the aesthetic. Everything seems to be working more or less right now. Something to show is that we can just rename this to what we want. So let's say this becomes Major Awesome. And if we do confirm rename, that becomes an available thing there. But something that we didn't mess with was this enable. So if I rename this here and I go bam again, I confirm rename, it still worked even though this thing is disabled, and we don't have any indication that this is disabled anyway. So that's something that we missed when we were back here in our setup. So to make that work, what we need to do is for our confirm rename, we need to take that be enabled as a very first thing that we do, and we do a branch. So if be enabled is not true, then you can't actually rename this object. We'll go back here again. We'll do preview actors here. We're not going to be modifying anything else there. And we're just going to set this to bam from bam to foo. It works. We undo it. We're going to set it, or we disable that one. We're going to set it to sorry. Hit confirm rename. It doesn't change. Another thing that we didn't really account for is like, what if the old name is the same as the new name? There's no reason to do a rename at that point then. So we're going to do get old name, and we're going to say is not equal to new name. And we'll do a and. We We also are going to set up we also probably want to update the old name so that it matches these things after this has happened. So we're going to do set old name is after we do this, it becomes new name. So that way the UX is up to date. Well, actually, we can just skip a step there. We'll just pull this over here. We'll put new name down again like this, and we'll plug it into here. And so now we have both of those together. So now only this one actually modified, and you can see this now says BAM foobar. The other bit of work that we can do at this point then is we can set up, we can make that enabled flag actually be visible. So we're going to go back to here. We're going to look at this checkbox here, but we're really going to look at everything else. So all of these are in their own, they're their own objects. And so we're just going to go to where it says is enabled. And for each one of them, we're going to do is enabled, be enabled. So now again, if we do preview actors, we can check, you can see the whole thing is disabled, only the checkbox remains. Similarly, another little bit of polish is on this border. I don't really like how this is full white, so we're going to take that brush color and we're going to just set it to 0.6 or 0.3 even, just to get it a little dim, something that's not quite so stark. Let's leave a little line there. Also, looking at this doesn't really show me the lines for mother. This feels a little claustrophobic to me. So again, back in the batch rename, we're going to select this item, and I'm going to just add some padding to the lines. So now there's just little lines in between. I like things to be even slightly bigger. You might disagree. You can tweak this to your own contentment. This is all a little claustrophobic again on the sides here. So I'm going to go to this top scroll box and we're going to add padding there. We're going to add 8 padding. A little bit severe. Again, I'm going to actually add 8 to this as well. Just really breaking up that space. Maybe that's too much there. Or maybe this border also needs 8. Maybe 8 and 2. So that's looking pretty good to me. But here, we shouldn't be able to do a confirm rename because we have no options. So that's another bit of polish that we can do is we can take this confirm rename and just like we did before, we can add an is enabled here. But instead of doing it based on just something simple, we're going to do a create a binding. And the binding that we're going to create is we're going to take that dynamic entry box and we're going to check the integer. So get num entries. And if the num entries is anything but 0, then it's enabled. And if it's not, then it's disabled. So now you can't click that until after you have your preview actors. In here, we're getting close to the ends for this one. I guess something that we should also check is to see that this allow wildcards works. So I'm going to take the replacement and I'm going to replace actor with name, get some recursion in there. So that threw us an error, probably, since that didn't seem to succeed. So here we're looking at this code again, and we got resolve find pattern is not defined. So in this case, we didn't seem to get a resolve find pattern. So let's try to just see if we can figure out why that would be. So yes. This is just an error here. This shouldn't be resolve find pattern. This should be find pattern. And this should be replace pattern. So again, we'll go back to here. We'll go to our find and replace Python. Just gonna copy and paste that in there, compile. And now if we do the same thing, we allow wildcards, and we're gonna just set up actor and try to replace that with name. What we should expect to see is, yeah, name is just slammed in there, but if we turn allow wildcards on and we do it, then now we have some recursion going on. Recursion. Let's set things back up to a better value here, something more reasonable, and we're good to go. So now before we finish up here, let's just test what would happen if we tried to do everything. Do we get a scroll wheel? If we shrink this down, yes we do. We do get scrolling, so that's good. That's what we want. And so then the final few bits of polish will be to add some information here to the bottom of the screen that is information about how the variables work, so that whoever's using this after us knows what variables they have available to them. So here in the designer, we have this vertical box. We've got auto here. This is an auto. This is an auto as well. And we're going to just add another border to this vertical box. This border is at the bottom. We're going to have it do fill, and we're going to put it from the bottom line here. We're going to add a bunch of padding. We want 8 padding, and we're going to set the tint to 0.5 or 0.3. And we're going to just, I've already written this out. Here is the text that we want to put into this. And so we need to do 2 things. We need to have a vertical box, because we're going to have 2 lines of text. We're going to have a header and another. So we're going to have the text that we got written. We're going to put a text box as the header and a text box as the body. For the body, we're going to just paste this in and make it small and italic, and probably for this box here, this border, let's make it darker instead of lighter, and let's make the text not fully opaque. And for this header, we'll have that be the same. We'll go down again to 10. Maybe we'll do bold italic, and this will be variable documentation, or maybe even wildcard. And then maybe we'll give this a bit of padding just for some cleanliness sake, so it's a little bit nested. This here will also become darker, so that, or less opaque, just so it's not so jarring. Yeah, like that. And then the 2 things that we need to do here then is a clipping and transform policy here. So we're going to go to transform policy. Not transform policy, sorry. We're going to do word wrap. So here we want to add word wrap. Here's auto wrap text, and we'll do the default wrap. And we'll here just make sure that this doesn't show up if it gets shrunk too far down, by changing the clipping to clip to bounds. And actually we'll set this one to clip to bounds too. And so now as we shrink it, that did not what I expected. But that's all right, because in some ways that's kind of actually ideal that it just clips there. So we'll ignore that bit. That didn't work. And instead we're just going to go to the list item. And for this old name, we want to make sure we clip this to the bounds, because we don't want this showing up underneath. So now, again, we preview actors. go here. Now it's clipping nicely. So now you have a fully functioning batch rename. And so the last bit of information that we have to go through is how do we make this tool accessible through a right-click menu and in a variety of different places. Now, automatically here, once this is loaded, once it has been loaded once, any utility widgets you create will show up in this editor utility widgets. Currently, there's a few extras, and that's because of how it caches it. The next time this editor opens, that will be cleaned out. But so let's ignore that one, because I think that a more convenient way to get to things is through a right-click menu, where you can go right-click and open the batch rename with the items selected. That's kind of a more intuitive way that people will think about how to get to these things. So to get started, what we have to do is we have to create another utility blueprint. Instead of using a widget, we're going to use a blueprint this time. And the class that we're going to do is action. We're going to search for action, and we want an actor action utility. So this will show up in actor right-click menus. We're going to call it actor action, and we're going to call it batch rename. So this is the actor actions for the batch rename tool. To make it work here, you just have to create a function. It's pretty simple. You create a new function, you call it what you want it to be. So like batch rename, because that's what I want it to happen, or I want it to say in the context menu. I'm going to give it a description, opens the batch rename widget. And importantly, it has to have this call in editor flag checked. So once that's checked, then you can, this will show up in the menu. So just to even show that as it is, if I hit compile here, and I go to an actor and I go to scripted actions now, I have a batch rename. That's not going to do anything because we haven't hooked anything up here yet. To spawn our widget, we need to use an editor utility subsystem. So get editor utility subsystem. And then we're going to do spawn and register tab. And for that one, we're going to use our UW batch rename. So here, actor, scripted actions, let's close this just for fun, batch rename, pops it up. You can even have it after this if you wanted to. You can actually have it then do that callback. So if we cast this to our EUW batch rename, then now we can do preview or all right, we need to create a function for that. So let's go back here real quickly. This event graph here. This onClicked isn't accessible because it's on the button preview actors. And so what we really want to do is we want to just go through here and we want to do a collapse to function. We'll call this on preview actors clicked. We do the same thing for the preview assets. On preview assets clicked. And so now back in this action, we can take that and we can do on preview actors clicked. And so now when someone launches it, they do scripted action batch rename, it's going to show up here as in, hey, they don't even have to, work with the find patterns. They can just grab this list of items, do batch rename, and you see it's just updated that. It's as if it clicked that buttons for them. So now they can say, oh, actually, you know what? I want to make this food. And then that one gets renamed without even having to mess with the find rename patterns. So then here we're going to create the same thing for assets, because so far this actually does work for assets as well, but we haven't been using it. We haven't been testing it that much. So here on this actor one, we're going to duplicate it. We're going to call it asset action batch rename. And we're going to go to class settings and we're going to change it from actor to asset action utility. I'm going to reparent that, compile. For the batch rename, though, we don't want to do on preview actors selected anymore. We're going to do on preview assets clicked. And so now if we select all of these and we do scripted actions, batch rename, you can see it's already populated those for us. And so with that, minus any bugs that I haven't caught, this is a complete tool. And so you can add this tool to your team. You can do this in a plugin, although if it's in a plugin, then you'll have to load these manually since those aren't searched for. It kind of depends on when the plugin loads, but in general, those aren't searched for automatically. But you can have this in your tool somewhere. Definitely work with whoever your team is to figure out the best place for this tool. All of the source files here are going to be provided as well. Check the page where this is posted for those. And I hope that this has been helpful and it's maybe taught you some of the different things you can do with editor utility widgets and the type of complexity that you can build. This is actually a pretty simple tool when you get down to it. But it has a really high rate of return for progression. And so what I hope to see is you make some tools of your own that can help accelerate your workflows of you and your team by using kind of this information.